One, two, three, start. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. I am back with a new video. I repeated myself. And that's okay. Let's proceed further. So today we're going to talk about what happened with my webcomic. So some of you might know about this. I think in October or September, I started on this 16-week webcomic journey, which was supposed to end sometime in January. However, a lot of things happened and I had to make some painful decisions, and I'm going to share with you the whole journey of what exactly happened and where it stands right now. And let's go. Before we go any further, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Yoa Creates. I'm a full-time working professional, but not professional artist. But my work is very different from my art. And okay, that's not the focus of this video. So I draw in my free time, and as a result there are many constraints that happen whenever I'm attempting challenges as these. So the reason why I wanted to do this challenge was because I personally want to complete a story or share a story with everyone, and I think I've come up with some stories which are worth sharing. I mean, they are not something which I can keep to myself, but it's just that every time I try to work on them, something or the other comes up. Like my first story, I started with a story called Habit. I didn't like where the plot was going, and my skills seemed very primitive, so I dropped that. Then I started writing Loves Me Not, and because I just started writing it and I was trying to figure out the story as I go. I found that there was too much of lag in the story, and I didn't know how the story was going to play out, and I decided to park that story, set it in backlog, and then I decided to write a sub story for figuring out a main story. But now I was venturing out from a regular romance genre to a modern world setting to a fantasy setting in my story called Mishaps in the Enchanted Forest. However, that did not work out either, because I was not sure where the plot was going to go, and I didn't want to confuse people by saying that, okay, in this chapter this is what's going to happen, but after a while the whole world was changing and the story became much bigger, and hopefully one day I can share with you guys what that story is. But really, truly, honestly, I had to put that in backlog. So after then we had I was very busy with my life, finishing my degrees and getting a job. So during all this process, I really couldn't focus on the art, and there was definitely the pandemic. Let's not speak of that. So that was an era when I started drawing less and less and less, and eventually I kind of stopped creating stories. And I only revived my passion for creating stories last year, and as a result, I thought that, okay, a good way to start this is without having any pressure on myself. I'll start a 16-week challenge so that I can finish one story in 16 weeks. So I had a story idea which was supposed to be a smaller part of a bigger story, but let's not worry about that right now. This smaller part was supposed to be not related to the bigger story, and it was supposed to be very light, and even if I made some mistakes in here, it wouldn't have mattered as much. So that's why I decided to start the 16-week journey with this story called Boss's Love Story. and I really wanted to keep it very simple. So I drew a bit of a plan. So I had like 16 weeks planned out. In the first 1 to 4 weeks, I just wanted to do like 5 to 7 chapters of it, because that's the length of the story. It was supposed to be that short. And in the first 4 weeks, I wanted to draw character design, just like thumbnail key shots, so that I know what are the key scenes I wanted to have. In weeks 5 to 8, I wanted to thumbnail the whole story. So I have these key shot thumbnails, and I wanted to like figure out where things are going, where should I figure out the in between shots between each key shot. And then in 9 to 12, I wanted to sketch out the story. I was not going to go through a line art phase, because I was going to keep it strictly as a web series, so a web comic. So I did not want to line art, and also I don't think I have the skills to line art. So I just wanted to have a sketch and then color, add shading in weeks 13 and 16, and that way I would have a complete story in weeks 1 to 16. The start date of this story was September 18th, and it was supposed to end on Jan 4th, and I was going to launch the story by Jan 4th, and I was using YouTube Shorts, Notion, and ClickUp to like track and plan my story. So, but now we are on the 2nd of March. It's almost like 2 months since my intended deadline. So what happened? So what happened was that initially I started sharing the progress as per the plan. After 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks of sharing progress, a few things started going wrong. The first one being that because it was the end, I started this challenge in the end of the year, and at the end of the year, I want to do art challenges. So I am very fond of Inktober, Huember, especially Inktober and Huember. So Inktober is inking only challenge, I guess. I mean, to put it summarize it in one line, it's a challenge where you practice how to ink your drawings, or like drawing with pen. I personally tend to draw with pen and draw only in in black ink. And Inktober is the time when it always occurs in October, and it is the time when I always love to revive something which I call like the Inktober OCs. So I was like torn between doing Inktober and torn between doing working on the comic, because like, working on a comic I feel like it's a full-time commitment. And Huember, again, it's like it's very key. It's I don't even know how to say. I like to color things, and Huember is in the whole month of November, you draw drawings with one particular color as a main color for the day. And I really wanted to do that, but I was again torn that I couldn't do it because I had to focus on my comic. And then I had like the work-life balance, because I was working 8 hours, sometimes a bit more, but usually I'm working 8 hours. I'm doing a full-time job, and by the time you finish your job and come back home, you become extremely tired. And then I also had to cook for myself, clean my room, and on top of that doing art. Sometimes it was not possible, and I also had some other commitments. So this whole thing, it kind of I didn't know how to have a good work-life balance and still work on my comic. And the biggest one here though is like, I mean, I would have let everything go, but the biggest one here was the imposter syndrome I had. Like, you start noticing stuff, you start noticing all the skills you don't have, and you want to draw and panel and like make your drawing come to life. You notice that you don't know how to draw like backgrounds. I don't even know I have good anatomy skills. I was worried that I was worried that the plot was going to fall apart after I draw for a few times. I mean, and I didn't have much time to learn any of them, and I was hoping that I would learn them as I pick up the comic, but I felt paralyzed and I couldn't draw. So that's why I hit the crisis mode. I started panicking more and more, and it just got to a point where I stopped sharing the progress online, and I just had to like take a breath, relax, and throw the initial plan into the trash. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, I stopped sharing progress online, I reduced the scope of the story, and I reduced the number of characters so that I can work only on a very, very small part of the story. Because I think by this point, I felt like the story was getting bigger and bigger. And I further decided to go with the next action plan. I started outlining the story because I wanted to have a good sense of what the story had. Then I started redesigning the characters, and I was also redefining character relationships because, like, as I was writing the outline, I found that so much of the story was so different right now. Like, it's really amazing how the story evolved. I'm very proud of it. So let me spend some time on it. Like, I decided, okay, these are the main things I want to happen in the story, and then for these main things to happen, these are the characters I have, and I was trying to flesh out the characters a little bit. And as I was fleshing out the characters, I saw that, okay, these characters who I initially thought had a different relationship now have a completely different relationship. I also brought in some of the smaller stories I had, and I merged them together into some character backstories, so that it felt like the characters are more fleshed out and there was more to these characters. And to be honest, there was, because sorry, because my story was like a huge I mean, if you think this was my story, then we had a bigger story, and I was tying in this bigger story into my story, and I was trying to figure out how this whole world looks like, because that's really how I can write a very compelling story. And this was kind of like it's not something I just wanted to write and throw away, but I was really attached to the characters. I mean, the main character in this story was actually supposed to be like, how do I say? He was supposed to be a minor character in my story, Loves Me Not. But as I was developing his backstory, because remember, I talked about Loves Me Not and how after writing a few episodes, I couldn't figure out where the story was going to go, and that's why I decided to scrap it away and try to redefine characters and rewrite the outline for that. So this story was actually supposed to be a small, minor, unrelated part to Loves Me Not, and now the whole everything got redefined. And in the process of redefining Loves Me Not, I got really attached to this character who is like a bartender in that story, and I started developing his character and things around him, and that completely emerged into a whole story on its own, which is Boss's love story. And I honestly couldn't give up, like couldn't just say this is it, we have to go with whatever we have. And even if the art doesn't look good, I couldn't just see that happen. Like I needed the art to look a little bit better than I believed. And I think like the imposter syndrome played a part in here, because I wanted maybe a bit of perfectionism too. I don't know. At this point, I just feel bad that the story is not out yet, and all of you have to wait until that story is out. So I had to because my story is now a part of a much bigger story. And even Loves Me Not is not a small story anymore. It became like I tied it into a bigger story. Over the last 4 or 5 years I haven't worked on it, and so this small story is part of a bigger story, which is a part of a much bigger story. And I had to figure out at least a base level of details on these stories before, on all the other stories, before I actually said, okay, I can write this now. I would have no regrets. I mean, art was even like less of a concern at this point. I just needed to figure out details of the story. And I think one of the main reason is that I had to figure out that the storylines are not matching. Like I have like these many characters, and sometimes I feel like I have similar storyline for each character. So if you say this person went to this city and did something, or like this person fell in love with this girl, and the relationship dynamics for these two characters were similar to the relationship dynamics of some other characters I had. So if I'm like writing one small story and I've like it is in place, I felt like I would not be able to use those character guidelines to a character dynamics in my bigger story. And that's why I really needed to figure out everyone's place in the bigger story. Okay, let's take a break, guys. Let's breathe and relax, and let's just go. The next thing, and as I was mentioning, the next thing we have is like character design, because now I have like these so many characters in the story, in the bigger story, and I not only needed to figure out the character designs in my story, but I also had to figure out the character designs of some key characters in the bigger story, because I could not have overlapping designs. I felt that my visual library is very small because of the limited amount of time I had to practice things. So as a result, every time I draw a new character, I feel like they have similar designs. So that's why I had to figure out like how they look like, and to make sure the characters in the bigger story and my smaller story all have distinctly defining features, which is attuned with their character, but also not overcomplicate the design, so that I, as probably like Mary Kuhn calls it, my characters have Genshin syndrome, where it is like you have so many details in a character design that you cannot draw them for the same for multiple panels. I mean, I don't think that's advised in a comic. I know some artists do, and I really admire them, but for my skill level and for my sanity, I probably cannot do that. So I had a few guidelines in mind already. So I tried to figure out character designs for my characters, and although this is still a draft, and I realized I have to do something. Okay. Sorry. But this helped me so I laid out all my characters, at least as many as I can, in one page, and I tried to figure out, okay, how do these look in conjunction with others. But then when I was doing some OCR challenges to, you know, develop their dynamics further, the character dynamics further, I found I levitated to some other designs for these characters. So what was the point of doing all this character designing exercise? I tell you, it's a bit frustrating. But anyway, this also helped me figure out a few details about each characters. So that's there. And once I figured out the character design, I could figure out a few of their character details, add personality traits to them, and then these personality traits in turn help me flesh out more character stories and understand what's going on. So now, the current state of the story, I mean, this is not the bigger story, but, you know, just the boss's love story. Yeah. So we have 5 parts to the story as of now. I might be adding 1 or 2 more parts in the future. But this just goes to say how big the story became over time. And for now, I've decided to focus on part 1 and 2, which do not change much. Even in many of the iterations I have, the parts 1 and 2 do not change much. So I plan to do 1 and 2. And the original plan was to post part 1 at once during the launch, but because of the time I have and my goals for it, goals for the story, I decided to postpone the whole story to a much later time. Yes, so that's the hard decision I had to take at the end of all this, because I'm still figuring out some more key details of the bigger story, because that will impact what's going to happen in the smaller story, and especially that will impact what happens in chapter 1 or 2. So that's why I have to wait until I figure that out. So I'm postponing this story for a future date, and I'll come back. I'm going to come back to the story again, and in the meantime, I'll probably work on some other projects I have in mind, and this time I'll be more dedicated to the project. I hope so. But this year, definitely, I'm going to post one story and start and finish one story, and at least in my record, I'll finish it. It might take some time for you guys to see the progress, but that's my goal, and that's what I'm working forward to. If you like to keep track of things, I'm going to share the progress on my YouTube channel, so please do like and subscribe to my channel if you're interested. If you're interested in learning how the process goes. The process is going to be a bit more raw and unfiltered, so if it is frustrating, I would just say so, and I'll keep you in the loop, because I think the way recently my perspective about sharing things online has changed a little bit, so I think this time I probably would not abandon showing the progress, and I'll plan ahead, and I'll again make such a video once I've figured out the details of the other project I'm working on. But for now, even this story goes into my backlog, but it will come. Definitely it will come, because I really want to share their story with you guys. All right, thank you for being here, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye.